This podcast is recorded on stolen and unceded Aboriginal land.
We acknowledge the First Nations and elders of this country and join their calls for justice. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land.
And I feel bad because I'm just like in my stress zone and I'm like, get out of the room, I got a podcast. Anyway.
The most important thing you can do.
Yeah.
It's pretty rude of Cyclone Alfred to not respect your 4-day work week, I think.
Yeah, I know. Right to disconnect. Cyclone Alfred didn't get the fucking memo.
Okay, I mean, yeah, we're recording this on Friday afternoon. We thought we might not be able to do the pod because, the cyclone was supposed to be landing in Brisbane now. What's going – and I guess people will hear this after that, but we won't know, right? We just have no idea.
Who knows what will have happened? I mean, they've referred to him, Cyclone Alfred, as
her.
Erratic. So apparently he keeps doing things that no one expects. He was meant to, initially it was going to be like Wednesday, Thursday, and then it was Thursday, Friday, and now it's Friday, Saturday, and now it's definitely Saturday. As we're recording this, they said that at one point it was maybe going to be a Category 3. Now they're saying it's going to be a Category 1 by the time it reaches Brisbane. I don't fucking know what's happening. We have just been frantically, sandbagging and trying to keep on top of communications and what the fuck's happening and just waiting.
I did see, not to get all political about everything, but I did see an article saying bipartisan sandbagging team helping out.
Yeah. Did you read the article?
Well, I saw that it was 20. It was one Liberal person,
yep,
a couple of union members, and 20 Greens volunteers. Is that right?
Yeah, at least 20.
Okay.
If you go to any of the sandbagging sites in and across Brisbane, it is just a sea of green. And then there will be certainly at Toowong where I've been on the west side, there has been one LNP, I assume a staffer maybe, who'll kind of be there for a bit, but then mostly just sit on his phone. Not that I'm also sitting on my phone all the time, but we have got so many volunteers there. And there was maybe, I think the Labor candidate came at one point. She was maybe able to muster up one volunteer. And then this journo comes along and is like, wow, all the parties working together.
What a team effort.
Yeah.
We're all in this together, it seems. Is Chris Afuli doing okay, or is there any critique we could make of their actual response?
I thought you meant is he okay if I checked in on him? I'm I don't know, Tom, not really my greatest concern right now.
Welfare check. Is he doing an okay job of leading the state in these uncertain times?
I guess so. It's I was reflecting on the fact that there are so many agencies and so many sources of information, obviously, but I will still, I don't know if this is the same for the average Queenslander, I will tune into the Premier's press conference and take that as a point of truth, which I was just reflecting on as something interesting. And same with Albanese, same with the Prime Minister. Somehow I feel like I can trust that they will have up-to-date and correct information.
Well, something I've noticed about Tropical Cyclone Alfred is it's not named Anthony. Tropical Cyclone Alfred could have been known as Cyclone Anthony before a switch from the Bureau of Meteorology. The Bureau maintains an approved list of alphabetical names for cyclones divided into 5 sections. After Zelia finished the previous section of the list, the next scheduled name was Anthony before the bomb swapped to the next A name, Alfred.
I heard this at the time. I heard that they were preemptively changing it because they're obviously I would like to know what person at Bomb was we have the opportunity to do the funniest thing ever, but...
Well, they said when a name matches a prominent person of the time, we reorder to the next name starting with that same letter to avoid any confusion.
Could be confusing.
Which I just love. It's what kind of confusion?
Well, are you referring to
Anthony's bearing down on Brisbane. You mean Alvo? I'm confused.
Well, I mean, was joking at one point that we could look at the cyclone tracker. Someone could also make a politician's tracker, but that would roughly track the path of, Albanese moving up to Brisbane as it gets. Well, although apparently Peter Dutton has moved away from Brisbane to do his little fundraiser, so he didn't think that was politically expedient to stay around. You've heard this, haven't you?
Yeah, what is it? He's in Justin Hems's house in Sydney or something.
Something like that. There. Yeah.
But I just Anthony's caused horrific devastation across the state of Queensland.
See, it's confusing.
Sorry, who are we talking
right?
about it?
It's confusing. I did also the first day that I went down to the sandbag site where there were just a million Greens volunteers. And the first guy that I spoke to was like, oh, do you have a permanent marker? I just want to write my name on this, like a ball of Powerade that the Greens had brought down. And he was like, it's a bit funny as well because my name's Alfred. So he is getting absolutely ripped to shreds in the group chat right now, of course. But yeah.
The name Anthony has been pushed further down the list, scheduled to be used 41 cyclones after Alfred. So, okay, so if you're still around in the top job then, Alvo, you'll be doing pretty well, I reckon. Another name change maybe in the future, with the next name selected for the letter P being Peter, P-E-T-A, with identical pronunciation to opposition leader Peter Dutton.
Thank you for clarifying that, whoever wrote this article on the AAP.
It's the fucking SPS.
Yes, Peter. It is similar to the words Peter Dutton.
Stay safe, everyone.
Not only would it be a bad thing if the Albanese government were re-elected, but it would be a particularly bad thing if he were re-elected in a hung parliament or a minority government and he was reliant on the Teals, God forbid the Greens.
We're stuck with the hosts of Chapo Shithouse podcast.
Serious danger to Australia.
Hey, speaking of cyclones, which can be seriously dangerous, this is Serious Danger, a podcast about green politics in Australia. This is not an official Greens Party podcast. I'm Emerald Moon. Tom Ballard is with us.
Hi, everyone.
Producer Michael the Griff Griffin is also here. I'm recording, yes, of course, in Meanjin, Brisbane, on Yagara and Turrbal country. How about you, Tom?
I'm in Nam on Wurundjeri and Bunurong country. And we're obviously, for all our joking aside, we hope everyone's okay and safe. And I guess it's good news this thing's being downgraded. But you were saying it's sort of it's not so much, and we hear about these massive winds, which I'm sure will be a problem, but like the flooding, right? Particularly northern New South Wales. That's what you're concerned about,
Well, for Brisbane as well, like it's the areas around Brisbane that flooded in 2022. But yes, similarly for Lismore and Byron Shire. Like, yes, I still get it's something about Lismore. It is home, but Lismore particularly, just because it just got so destroyed in 2022, it triggers something in me already. I don't know what will have happened by the time this episode comes out, but thinking about whole communities being, destroyed is quite distressing.
Yes, fair enough. This week on the show, we are looking at the latest in Greens election policy announcements, and we're going to be talking about people being kind of snowflakey, all right? They need to toughen a little fuck up, drink some fucking cement when it comes to jokes and people supporting Palestine. We want to thank our new patrons. Thank you very much for supporting the show. John, Ellie, and a user called Victorian Community Climate Adaptation Fund Now.
Okay, that's a beautiful name for a cyclone. Maybe I wonder if that's on the approved list.
Get it in there. We put out a Patreon app this week. It was another installment of Inside the Greens. We finished Chapter 8, Taking a Stand. We're looking at the 2004 election. Peter Garrett makes an appearance, which is relevant to this week's episode as well. Mark Latham chatting to Bob Brown as well. That really made me laugh. Bob Brown taking Mark Latham on a tour of the Tasmanian wilderness.
And him being like, it's mid.
Giving it a 4 out of 10 and breaking Bob's heart. Oh, some good stuff there. And thank you so much again to people who pay $3 a month. You get all this bonus content. You support the show. It's because of that support we've been able to do these Meet the Candidate bonus episodes recently. If you've missed them, do check your feed. We're trying to get to as many Greens candidates in the upcoming election as possible. We've already released episodes with Tara Burnett for Cooper and Mandy Nolan for Richmond. Emerald had a chat to Mandy this week as well. So thank you for your support. Thanks for making that happen. And thanks to the Griff for listening to our voices so much.
Yes, we love the Griff. Quickly, we wanted to do a little report back because we finished going through the results of the listener survey, which many of you kindly completed. Actually, in fact, around 260 responses, which for a show that's, we are, we have our place, but we're not the biggest show in Australia. And so I think that's a testament to our nerdy and very engaged and lovely and wonderful listeners. So thank you for listening. Also, shout out because we asked people what state or territory they were from and we got one response from the NT. So shout out to you, our beloved NT listener who filled out the survey to represent the Northern Territory. Very much appreciate that.
Much obliged.
We had lots of good stuff coming out of this survey. There's like so much in here for us to kind of go through. And so Mike and Tom and I have been reviewing it, seeing what we can implement and what we can learn and take on board. There were lots of really good guest and topic suggestions. Some we've already done, like the candidate episodes kind of came out of, this feedback around some people like hearing from a bunch of candidates and others don't. So we've separated it out from the main episodes to do these bonus episodes. We also, one of the most highly suggested or requested topics was around union-related things, unionism. And so I think we have a little something in the works there coming up soon. So keep your ears peeled for that in your feeds. And then there were a bunch of like technical suggestions around, ways that we could optimize our reach using SEO and some of the things we can't implement just because we don't have the capacity to do it. Mike doesn't have the capacity to do it, like more, cuts of highlights from the show and things like that. We would love to do, but we can't do right now. But some of them we are implementing. So thank you for all of those suggestions. Now, I have been asked to address the ageism allegations, so I had to say, so we had a few people point out that like the age brackets, and I will admit I did these age brackets, but I clearly was not thinking very clearly when I did them because they don't really make a lot of sense, because we did like under 18. And then you got 18 to 25, that's 7 years if anyone's good at maths. 25 to 35, that's 10 years. And then you got 35 to 55, which is 20 years. And then just 55 plus, which one person did put in their response, I love the youth, but a knowledge of Oz social history is often lacking, and your age cutoff at 55 plus is telling. I'm 80.
80? We have an 80-year-old listening to the show.
Hello.
That's awesome.
And I mean, fair cop around. I agree. I don't know enough Australian history. I hope that we are learning as we read things like Inside the Greens. But thank you for listening still. And please always feel free to send us in little tidbits because we appreciate them. Yeah, someone else was like, I love you all, but what the fuck? The 35 to 55 age bracket made me feel so ancient. Why did you do that? Sorry. Yeah, so my sincere apologies for that.
God damn it. What else do we have? What else were people suggesting that we've followed up on already? That we're meeting our KPIs.
KPI, that's right. Tick. Well, as a couple of people I think were like, it would be great to hear Mike on the show more. So Mike joined us for the start of the episode last week when I recorded with Jared Mazza. Also, the Inside the Greens. This is the one where it's like Inside the Greens is very divisive or just kind of unclear whether you guys like it or not. But I feel like one thing was that a lot of people want to listen to Inside the Greens as a bit of a chunk. And so we will try to do more at a time, get more of that out on Patreon. So we're going to go by chapter. So there'll be a couple of Inside the Greens episodes that come out for a chapter. You can listen to those, and then we'll obviously mix it up with other deep dives and stuff on the Patreon feed. But we actually only have a few chapters left of the book. And then, we can do a little bit of reflecting, maybe see if Paddy Manning wants to come and discuss his work. We shall see. But yes, we will work towards finishing that one. I also can we read some of these? Because there were so many really lovely comments. I was like, can we read some of these out, please, Tom?
Sure. We deserve it.
We deserve it. Well, okay, someone did ask, if Emerald's the funny one and Tom's the cute one, what's Mike?
Did we establish that I'm the cute one? I guess so.
Yeah, well, that's what someone has said. Surely Mike is the smart one. Mike is the one that makes it happen.
The technical one. The important one.
The important one. Yeah, that's right. The leader, the boss. Another person said, thanks for what you're doing. Your analyses often put words to things I know in my bones but haven't figured out how to convey with conviction. Love sharing your pod with other people who live and breathe green, but it's also so accessible for people just starting on left politics.
Oh, that's very
I really
nice.
like that. The I know in my bones, but yeah.
Thanks for the podcast. I appreciate the effort. Frankly, it's the reason I'm a Greens member at all. That means the world. Yeah. The idea that this podcast has inspired people to join the party or get out there and door knocking means a lot. You've inspired my older brother in Melbourne to join and door knock. Thanks, Tom and the funny one and the Griff. You rock. Tom and Emerald, you two have a beautiful relationship. I love the subtle piss taking. I don't agree with much that the Greens stand for, but I admire your moral conviction.
Yes, amazing. Like, again, that you could stand to listen. That you love Tom and Mai's relationship so much that you would listen to a whole show that's extremely pro-Greens, but you don't even agree with that. But hey, look, we have listeners from all walks of life. Case in point, we said, we have an 80-year-old listener. We also have someone who completed the survey and said, just turned 18, excited to vote Greens in WA and the federal election. Serious Danger has been amazing for keeping up to date with what's happening at the moment. I'm sick of reading multiple news articles and getting various skewed reports of what's happening in Parliament. Happy voting. That will be this weekend. If they haven't done early voting, they will have just cast their first vote. That's quite exciting.
Hell yeah. Enjoy it. And last one to finish here, it can sometimes feel like you're going crazy being a leftist in Australia and having a media landscape with a strong conservative bias. So it's nice to be able to listen to your podcast and not feel like I'm alone, and to remember that there are others who are just as outraged as me. Keep up the great work. Thanks.
Love that. Yes, so thank you for everyone who filled it out. A couple of things that I was going to say for you guys then, for the listeners, that came out of this. One thing was that like 15% roughly of people who filled out the survey, and those are, a lot of them are long-term listeners, aren't actually subscribed in the podcast app. And I think that does help to get the podcast out there. It helps put us in other people's feeds and, you know, get our ratings up and everything. So if you're not subscribed in the app, press following or subscribe or whatever, and that would help us a great amount. And the other thing that we want to try is getting people to send in your recordings, your own, if you've got questions or if you've been out on a great door knock and you had a great conversation or a thought about, you know, politics and the state of things at the moment. Record a little voice memo, a short one on your phone, and email it to us, hello@seriousdangerpod.com. And we would love to hear your lovely voices on the pod.
Yeah, anything. Questions you've got, reflections on the show, or your field reports, being out and about on the doors leading up to the election, or anything you're seeing or thinking about. We'd love to sort of work that into the show on a regular basis. So yeah, hello@seriousdangerpod.com. We'd love to hear your sweet, sweet voices, please.
We're heading straight for the eye of the catfight. We're heading straight for the eye of the category 5.
Okay, so quick whip around, because we've had a few fairly major Greens policies announced in the last week or so that we wanted to give people the scoop on. I wanted to check though, like have the major parties been announcing any policies in the last week? I've obviously been very much in like cyclone prep land, so I don't know if anything's been happening that I've missed. Are they saying anything?
No cyclones will be named Anthony for another 40 cyclones. That's their major policy they're running on now. I mean, what are they going on now? Health, they're obviously going massive on health, right? In lots of
Labor announced they announced the additional
urgent care clinics and
urgent care clinics. Yep.
Yes, they're certainly going big on that, and the opposition is pretty much just matching them all, basically.
They're matching it, which is interesting. Yeah. No, well, that's fair enough. Well, I mean, the Greens also said ages ago that we should triple the bulk billing incentive for everyone and not just certain age groups, and obviously have been pushing for free GP clinics, state-funded clinics for years, and want Medicare to include dental and mental health. So just FYI, if you were wondering, listener.
I should say, I mean, something kind of is happening. I mean, there's a new poll out today, I think, at YouGov, which has Labor back in front at like 51.
Ooh,
and was setting out, well, I think would get Labor 72 seats or something like that if it played out. Coalition picking up a few. I think that one also had the Greens up one, like to a total of 5. So yes, at least the narrative seems to be doing
that's
a little bit better in Labor's favour.
U-turn from the kind of polling that we were seeing. That's very interesting. We'll have to dig more into that. But yeah, so last weekend, I believe it was, or about a week ago, we had an announcement featuring the man himself, Mr. Bob Brown, friend of the show, we can say. He was announcing that banning native forest logging will be a key balance of power demand for the Greens in a minority government with Samantha Ratnam and Sonia Semmons. The Age, I think that the framing from the Age article about this was instructive or interesting, right? The headline was, quote, "Back to basics and familiar faces as Greens eye balance of power." It reads, "The federal Greens are campaigning on core principles and have a key demand of minority government in the event of a hung parliament, a nationwide ban on native forest logging." Former leader Bob Brown, who lent the minor party's support to Julia Gillard's minority government in 2010, launched the policy on Friday. I mean, is the idea that they're going, oh, well, this is the Greens wheeling out Bob Brown and talking about forests to counteract the attacks from groups like Advance Australia that the Greens don't care about the environment anymore and they're all radical and they're not like Bob Brown.
Yeah, I mean, there's a gentle implication there that these is core principles as opposed to everything else we've been doing recently.
Yeah.
That's all bonus, fluffy stuff that there's been mission drift for the Greens.
Ending poverty, housing people, like healthcare,
campaigning
not
against
core
genocide.
stuff.
These are ridiculous. Yeah, these are just nice to haves.
Nice to haves. Yeah.
Which is not ideal. And yes, and I guess bringing out old mate Bobby. I mean, he does kind of make headlines whenever he does anything. Obviously, he's leading up to March in March as well, which is a big focus on the same demand of banning native forest logging. But hey, I mean, I'm for it. People like Bob Brown, they know what he stands for, and putting him endorsing this kind of policy and getting attention to it in a different way, I suppose there's something to be said for that.
Yeah. He has been busy. He has been around the country, like supporting Greens candidates. It's very impressive, very admirable.
Hey, maybe he's the 80-year-old who listens to our show.
Yeah. How old is Bob Brown? I don't.
He's like 81. Yeah, I think.
81. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's not 80, Tom. But.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. Okay. So native forest logging, it's banned. It's apparently. In South Australia, they've protected native forests since like the late 1800s. The ACT banned it in 1980s. As of now, WA and Victoria have ended native forest logging operations except for like fire breaks and salvage logging after windstorms, and that's on public land only. But in New South Wales, Tasmania and Queensland, outside of the southeast corner, I believe, government-owned logging operations are still operating and destroying native forests. So that's particularly where this ask or this demand is directed, I suppose. The Greens are saying that if native timber logging bans were rolled out across the country, they could deliver an annual reduction in emissions of 37.5 million tonnes of CO2 equivalent a year, or 8.5% of total annual emissions. That's something to be sniffed at.
And is this all done at the state level? Is there a national sort of approach to this, or are there national logging companies or powers that the Commonwealth government has in order to do a national native logging ban?
Yeah, it's a little from what I can tell, it's similar to a few of the other Greens policies where at the federal level, where the proposal is to like incentivize action by states and territories. So
sure.
Under the plan, the federal government would fund a transition of states away from native timber harvesting to the annual tune of $500 million for 20 years. And they also would spend $20 million over 4 years to improve carbon accounting.
Right. Gotcha.
Yes. Apparently, I mean, there seems to be, certainly this is something that has general support. Australia Institute polling from April this year shows 69% of Australians support ending native forest logging on public land, including, 62% of coalition voters, 76 of Green. Oh, this is interesting. 76% of Greens voters and 79% of Labor voters. I just caught that. That's
weird.
Confusing. That seems slightly wrong. Maybe they were confused. Anyway, slightly lower, there's a Biodiversity Council survey from last March which showed 55% support for banning it across the country, 35% undecided. But I think, very small portion of people who would oppose this.
For sure.
It is interesting that this was reported in that Age article as they're saying that the Greens would have 5 key demands in a balance of power scenario in minority government with Labor. They named dental, and I believe maybe mental, but dental into Medicare as a key one, certainly. Housing, it was somewhat unclear what the housing demand would be from this article, and I can't see this. Like, I don't know that it's been clear exactly what a housing demand would be. But then native forest logging, I suppose, is another one of these. And I have to say, I actually hadn't seen, like, have you seen this 5 key demands thing reported somewhere else? Because the only place I've seen it is in the Age, and I'm not sure exactly how clear that is yet.
Have we said we will have 5 key demands? We have announced them all yet, or have we put them out there?
That's just what the Age is saying. I haven't seen the 5 listed elsewhere. I know, like, I think ahead of the 2022 election, for example, the Greens did like 7, or there was a list that they announced, but that was quite close to the election. So yeah, maybe that's one to watch. Like I would expect that, you would hope that the Age wouldn't just report that out of nowhere, that this has come from somewhere, but I don't believe that full list has been released yet. It probably will surely, like once the election's called, maybe.
Right. Interesting.
Interesting indeed. And then this week, another key policy that the Greens announced was around making price gouging illegal. Did this one? It's hard for me to tell because I'm so in Cyclone Alfred land. Did this get much attention outside of here?
I think this one kind of flew under the radar a little bit. Yes, I think people know that the Greens like talking about price gouging a lot, so it might have been sort of just caught up in like not as anything particularly new.
Yeah.
But hey, we could talk about it. This is the biggest platform of all.
So true. It's so true. I mean, yes, I just also feel as though there was like this moment where there was a real what's the word when a symphony reaches the crescendo, of discourse around regulating and cracking down on supermarkets and grocery prices. And even though grocery prices apparently are still, there's a recent poll from Freshwater that says that it's topping the list of people's cost of living concerns. 70% of respondents say cost of living is among their top 3 issues. And groceries are at the top of that. But it just feels like it's not as much part of, like, as central to the political discussion right now. I feel as though people are kind of fatigued of hearing politicians be like, we're going to make groceries cheaper, because they're like, but are you? You're not, are you? Because nothing's really happened. There've been a million commissions and nothing's happened.
Because it feels like the narrative is, hey, inflation's under control and interest rates are coming down. But of course, the prices in your fucking supermarket
prices
aren't going down.
They don't lower prices. That's not.
Yeah.
It's not a real thing. Like, it will not go back to the way it was, certainly, unless there's actual intervention, government intervention. I mean, this is slightly different. Like, this isn't price caps. Like, for example, WA and Queensland, and I don't know about other states and territories, but they, ahead of their elections, said we should cap prices on a list of 30 essential items. This is more about specifically like price gouging, and so it gives the ACCC powers to apply for a court order if they believe that a supermarket is price gouging, or actually it's just a corporation has abused its market power by price gouging.
Yep.
It is broadly seems to be based on a model that's operating in the European Union, and it operates alongside, like, the Greens plan is that this would be new powers for the ACCC alongside divestiture powers. So they create a prices commission which monitors for price gouging in supermarkets and across the economy. That would start from July this year. The Prices Commission could then make referrals to the ACCC,
right,
which would also get additional resourcing, extra staff to deal with this. And then the ACCC, if it believes that a corporation has abused its market power by price gouging, can take them to court, can apply for a court order, which could include actions like lowering the price, like an enforceable order to lower the price for something, or they can issue fines up to $50 million, which is under Section 76 of the Competition Act.
Interesting. Okay. I mean, yeah, it sort of sounds like kind of like the work of that the ACCC currently does, but I suppose it's about focusing specifically on prices. I mean, we know of ACCC cases where they've been looking at Coles and Woolies and sort of saying, hey, hang on, you jacked up these prices, then cut the prices, and then acted like that was some incredible sale. Like, that's pretty dodgy, you guys. That is the kind of thing they've been focused on. So, but I guess more money to that organisation to do that work is good. Of course, the Commonwealth government can't legislate over prices because of our wonderful constitution. So this is kind of as good as it gets. But it'll also work alongside divestiture for the duopoly too, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, yeah. So I guess it's similar. Like, I guess maybe the main difference is creating this commission that's monitoring for price gouging and then referring to the ACCC, and the ACCC is going, well, you're using your power in shitty ways. You need to sell some of your market share and or drop your prices and pay big fine if you're being shit, etc.
Nice.
I think initially when I heard this, I'm like, okay, what is price gouging though? Like, it's I feel as though it's a kind of an ill-defined term. It feels emotive and it feels like a thing, but apparently there are these specific considerations which again are based on the EU model that the court would take into account, which include whether the price is excessive relative to cost, B, whether it is excessive relative to the economic value of the product provided, and C, whether it's excessive compared to if there was greater competition in the market. Relative to the economic value of the product provided, what does that mean?
No idea. No idea whatsoever. I mean, I think consideration is how fundamental the product is to people's basic needs to survive. That would be nice. Like if we did identify some basic items that people need in order to live and feed themselves, that would be kind of nice. Or stuff like baby nappies, I don't know, toilet paper, these kind of items, like they really should be. I mean, they should all just be made by the government basics factory, which just puts out these basic needs, things we need just in order to survive, and they're sold for at cost prices. That'd be good, please. That's
you
my
bloody
solution.
commie.
All right, now tell me about this big tech tax.
Big tech tax, that's the next one that was announced, I think, in the last couple of days, as at the time of recording. It is a digital services tax, which would tax companies that make more than $1.275 billion across their international operations. Specific. I think that's like based on a more round number in pounds or something that's converted to AUD.
I see.
Anyway, so that's what would be covered, and then they would get taxed 3% on revenue over $20 million in Australia. And these are companies that make that revenue on things like advertising, online marketplaces, user data, social media, etc. There was a news.com.au article on this that had some figures on 2024 revenue, and do you know how much you're seeing it in the show notes? But Amazon made more than $1 trillion Australian dollars. That's what that is, right? I had to look at this number and be like, $1,017.1 billion. That's over $1 trillion.
They're doing very well, Emerald.
Yeah, fucking hell. I got to stop watching all those restock videos on TikTok.
Don't stop watching Deadlock on Prime Video, though. That's a fantastic product made by great people, but everything else, obviously, evil and horrific.
Right. How much of that $1 trillion is yours, Tom?
I actually got my residual check from Deadlock recently, and it was all right.
Oh, very nice. Okay. All right. Maybe we shouldn't tax these guys. I don't know.
Definitely
it's trickled down. It's trickled down.
Definitely not.
Meta, of course, another big one. They made 264 billion Australian dollars in 2024. A bunch of other companies that would be covered, like Google, Uber, Menulog, Seek, interestingly, eBay, DoorDash, etc.
Wait, Menulog made more than $1.275 billion?
That's not that unsurprising, is it?
Jesus Christ.
People be ordering food.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. Did somebody say Menulog? The Parliamentary Budget Office costed this policy. They said it would bring in $11.5 billion over the next 10 years to 2034-35. They said that the top 16 tech companies in Australia collectively making $26.7 billion in revenue each year. And I think that was actually based on like 2022 to 23 for some reason. So I feel as though it could be more than that now. They did warn, though, that large multinationals are likely to respond by just shifting their Australian operations. I know, like, this was another thing, when the Greens were talking about a billionaire's tax, for example, they said, well, we'll impose a 10% limit on capital flight. But I still don't really know what the answer is for something like this, where it's like, if you're dealing with multinational corporations, what happens when they just shift offshore?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing to say is that it often doesn't happen, and the threat of capital flight is often used in the lobbying against these kind of taxes, right? I mean, you hear it all the time with tax rates. Oh, if we increase tax rates, all the millionaires are going to flood. I mean, Australia's tax rates stayed exactly the same. It was just again and again was the number one destination for worldwide millionaires as a place for people to come. There's lots of reasons why businesses and why wealthy individuals set up in a country. And I mean, hey, if they're making billions of dollars every year, they're not going to be quick to fuck off immediately, right? But they will very quickly use that as an excuse to lobby against these kind of taxes or this kind of redistributive policy,
and to be like, we'll leave and take all the jobs with us, and all of the whatever benefits that we provide to Australian society. Fucking vultures.
Now it does happen. I mean, I remember again we're in the corporate tax debate, and there was that. What's that the giant pharmaceutical company that used to be publicly owned?
CSL.
The CSL, yes. CSL was looking at setting up a factory in Australia and then eventually went with Switzerland, I believe, because the tax arrangements were more amenable to them. So it happens, but it's like, well, sometimes you got to call it and say, sorry, we tax in this country and we redistribute wealth, and you're still making billions of dollars.
Yeah, that's right. And that's the thing. It's like, you know, if we are a wealthy country, and if you want to make huge profits off it, as Sarah Hanson-Young said when she was announcing the policy, these big foreign-owned corporations make huge profits of Australians and resist regulation at every turn. It's time they paid their fair share of tax. I think it's like, I just think it's better. Yeah, it's better than not, like, there's the other thing. People are like, oh, well, you can try and tax them, but like it'll never work. They'll just dodge it. And it's like, well, at least we fucking try, you know, give it a crack. Try and take a little bit extra back for ordinary people.
And the alternative is a race to the bottom, you know? I mean, because these companies and the forces of capital will never stop saying, if you tax us more or if you don't tax us less, we're going to leave. So, of course, if you follow that logic, you just endlessly pursue it to lower and lower tax rates.
Yes.
Hacking away at the state and the rest of society. So, yeah, sometimes you need to call them on their bullshit.
And I have to believe that surely, like, there's a broad cross-section of society. Most people in Australia don't love big tech, right? Like, big tech is not exactly beloved. So I don't know, going after big tech I don't see as an enormous risk politically. Of course, there is this added element of Donald Trump threatening to impose tariffs on any foreign governments that apply taxes and regulations on US multinationals, including particularly big tech. So apparently 12 other countries, they already have a digital services tax similar to what the Greens are proposing, but Trump in the last week or two has been saying, if these other companies want to, I can't do the accent, but exert, quote, extraterritorial authority over American companies, then we will slap them with tariffs.
That's not extraterritorial authority. That's taxing companies operating in their fucking countries. You're doing extraterritorial stuff by being a multinational corporation doing business in our country, you motherfucker. Even though you say you're headquartered in, I don't know, the Bahamas or Ireland or whatever. No, you're here and you're trading here. You're employing people here. You're doing business here. You're going to pay taxes here. Google.
Yeah, well, the Trump stuff has already scared the government on the news media bargaining incentive, right? This thing that's meant to force social media companies to pay for news. It seems as though that's kind of like it's on hold. We don't know where the coalition is sitting on it. And it seems as though it's very unlikely that this is going to be in place before the election from Labor's side of things anyway. Disappointing.
Great. Yeah. Jesus Christ. And the free trade stuff that we signed with America, I think, fucks us over on all these different fronts as well. It's just like,
absolutely.
Like, you know, again, from my world, the world of entertainment and streaming, my understanding is that the free trade agreement we signed with America just basically means we can't, you know, any idea that Australia would impose local content quotas on streamers like Netflix is like just probably not going to happen because the free trade lobby will just ensure that.
And they're taking away jobs from people like Tom Ballard. And it's really fucked up. They're pulling pennies from your wallet, aren't they?
That's what makes me care about it, yes.
It's really outrageous. Have we spoken about techno-feudalism on the show before? And do you know about this, Tom? Have you?
I don't think so. I've heard Yanis Varoufakis being interviewed about this. This is his book that he recently published. He's been on Novara Media sort of laying out the theory, I suppose, sort of this new form of, capitalism's over, right? And this is this new
he's saying capitalism's
system.
over. Yeah.
We live in is techno-feudalism in which what does he call it? The cloud capital is basically the new big head honcho in town. Yeah.
Yeah. I read this book like a little while ago when it came out and really enjoyed it. I have to say, like, I don't necessarily, he kind of does spend a lot of time, particularly when he's presenting the book as like the argument that he's focusing on is that capitalism is dead and we have a new system that's replaced it. And I have to say, like, I'm not altogether convinced that, you know, capitalism is dead and this is a new system. But I do think the way that he describes the system itself is like immensely helpful and interesting and a really fascinating way to understand big tech's influence on our current economy and just our way of life generally. And I do recommend, I do recommend people read Techno-feudalism, but I also am going to put people who don't want to, he's got a little summary and like a video essay where he summarizes the book. We can link to that in the show notes. I wanted to read a bit from it as well, because what really fascinates me about it is this idea that techno-feudalism is characterized by us giving free labor to continue feeding the machine. So not even being paid for this labor, because we go home, sit on our phones and feed the algorithm, basically.
Yeah.
So he says that's what Amazon's Alexa or Google's Assistant or Apple's Siri is. It is a produced means of behavioral modification. It is a machine, a piece of capital, which we train to train us, to train it, to determine that which we want. And once we want it, the same networked machine sells it to us directly, bypassing markets. He says that markets, the medium of capitalism, have been replaced by cloud fiefs, digital trading platforms like Amazon.com or Alibaba, which, as we saw, look like but are not markets. And profit, the fuel of capitalism, well, that has been replaced by its feudal predecessor, rent, but specifically a new form of rent, a cloud rent that must be paid for access to those cloud fiefs or digital platforms. So the reason that he's like, this is more like feudalism is because we, the proletariat, people, by posting reviews, rating products, uploading videos, photos, all of that, quote, we help reproduce cloud capital without getting a penny for our labor. In essence, it has turned us into its cloud serfs.
Oh my God.
It's true, right? I mean,
Right.
well, we're literally doing it right now, but we're producing content. I guess Mike's getting paid for it, but yeah, like everything that we do, all the things that the way that we interact with the world so much of the time now in our free time when we leave our fucking paid work is we go and help build cloud capital. And then even the markets that want to access those platforms like Amazon are then paying rent to those fiefdoms. Like, it is interesting. I recommend it.
That's great. I want to read that book. Would Varoufakis's solution be something like, these massive companies should be taxed way more or broken up, or something a bit more radical?
I can't even remember actually if he goes much into, like what his proposed alternative is. It's been a while since I've read the book. I'd have to go back and see. But I do think it's just a good reminder. Like when you think about it that way and you remember, yes, like the influence that big tech has over the way that we live our lives, not just, markets and everything. Like it is so enormous and significant. And I think I do kind of agree with him. I think it's quite feasible to say that, or justifiable to say that, this is producing a whole kind of new economic system. Yeah. And so, yes, anything that we can do to try to rein in big tech's power or take them on, I think is very worthwhile.
TLDR, great policies, Greens. Vote one, Greens.
Well done.
86% of Aussie seniors believe political correctness is ruining society. And now one of the country's top comedians is taking aim at PC culture.
Do I look like I give a dilly gaff? Am I being direct enough? Dilly gaff.
Kevin Bloody Wilson joins us live now from Perth. Good morning to you, Kevin.
We're entering the danger zone, I fear. Here we go.
My palms are starting to sweat.
All right, I want to talk about this. It just seems like there's a bunch of stories recently that would fit in the category of snowflakery. And I think it has big impacts on artistic expression and political speech. We've touched on similar topics, over the past, throughout the entire show, basically. But it just seems like, I don't know, recently we're living in a moment when a lot of these stories are coming together. What do you think of when you think of the term snowflake? How does it make you feel?
Cold. It makes me feel like, what I think when I hear that term? I think it's a little bit old-fashioned. It feels very millennial. It feels very like mid-2010s.
Yeah, 2016, yes. What would replace it? Just wokeist?
Yeah. People still, they still say like triggered, woke.
That kind of thing, right? And I mean, do you think, I guess my theory is generally there just seems to be something happening in discourse, particularly in Australia at the moment, I mean all over the place, but watching Australian sort of political moments and these cultural moments kind of break through in which it seems like, yes, people are fully getting their snowflake on, or there just seems to be this insane level of fragility, or mock outrage going along. It just seems a bit bizarre, and I can't quite tell. I would argue that in the mid 2010s or in the peak woke era, for lack of a better term, you could make an argument there are lots of instances of stuff that would be somewhat silly, some excesses of identity politics or of certain kinds of progressivism that people mocked, and you could say there was a reaction to that or response to that. But these days, it's just like, I think the right has got us beat in terms of getting outraged and offended by every little thing to a ridiculous level. Is that fair to say?
Yes, absolutely. It's always like that. And like so much of it is confected. I mean, the other thing is I wonder, again, what the influence, not necessarily, the way that the algorithm works, the way that big tech algorithms reward outrage probably has a role to play in that. And then the way that political movements or certain sides of politics use those algorithms and use, bots and all sorts of other tools to feed the outrage machine. I feel like that's also part of it.
Yeah, but that's been happening for so long that it feels like it's just everyone has those same settings. Like, my theory is that everyone is a snowflake, right? Like, everyone likes to think
Except,
that
are you a
they're
snowflake?
hardy. Yes, definitely. And I mean, hopefully I think about it enough so that I can manage my own emotions, monitor them, and choose and remind myself to focus on the shit that matters and try and let certain things go. Certainly for a lot of years I was a snowflake. But yeah, it's just like that's just become discourse too. It's just people getting excessively outraged over the thing that matters to them and then viewing anything that other people get outraged by as being ridiculous and silly and stupid and woke.
Yeah. I can't believe I'm saying this, but did you see Grimes's interview with Time where she was talking about like the death of God, of, religion, and the way that politics has kind of filled that vacuum of faith and meant, like, because people are less religious now, that has led to a real emotional and kind of deep-seated clinging to one's politics as represented, like that is their faith now, and people defend their politics in a more like fragile and deeply personal and emotional way than they would have in the past when their faith would have filled that. And like I watched this and I didn't really have an opinion one way or the other. I mean, Grimes says a lot of stupid things, but it's an interesting proposition, right?
I suppose so, yes. I mean, human beings have a deep need to believe in stuff, and I think it's easy to see
and to identify with a group as well. Like, I think that's a big part of it,
right? To believe that you stand for something, that things are moving in a certain direction, or they should move in a certain direction. That there's a purpose to this. These are all very basic human questions that, yes, questions that were often answered by religion. As we become more secularized, yes, do people replace them with other things to believe in? I mean, I don't know. Whenever people say that, I always think, well, people did some really fucked up, shitty things when they were really into their religion. So
yeah,
a secular moralism in which, you can justify and explain your reasoning behind your moral positions is kind of good.
But yeah, like, is, politically driven snowflakery just the new version of like trying to burn women at the stake because they upset your religion in some way? I don't know.
Yes. Or maybe they made a cheeky comment about you at a festival. This is my first example. Aussie music legend and former politician Peter Garrett has come under fire after encouraging festival goers to pretend they're dancing on Gina Rinehart's grave. The former Midnight Oil frontman took to the stage at Perth Festival with his other band, the Alter Egos, on Friday night. The 71-year-old told the audience to pretend they're dancing on Gina Rinehart's grave in a major dig at the billionaire mining magnate. That is a dig. While also slamming Woodside and US President Donald Trump. WA Premier Roger Cook slammed Garrett's comments and said the singer should have known that sort of language is completely inappropriate.
Get a grip.
The arts are also there to challenge us, and perhaps Peter Garrett thought that he was challenging the people of WA when he made his inappropriate comments, Mr. Cook said. He wasn't, quite frankly. He was being disrespectful and sowing the sort of seeds of hatred that we do see around the place, so he's got to stop.
Civility discourse. Fucking hell.
See, and I don't know what to think of it, because I think, like, on the one hand, I'm like, well, this has always happened. It's always been thus. Artists have said things. People in power have been outraged. They've given comments. They've tried to censor them and come down on them and say, that's ridiculous. Stop saying that. But this feels like a different category where it's like, you're not actually offended by this. Of course, Peter Garrett, who's been an activist who doesn't like billionaires and fights for the environment for a very long time, would say something like this about a horrific person, a billionaire like Gina Rinehart. We all know this. Everyone knows this. But then we're just sort of playing this weird theatrical response in which he feels like he has to pretend to be offended, and as if this kind of comment crosses some kind of imaginary line. Isn't that stupid?
Well, I think it's really illustrative of what we do to women in power and women who work hard in this country, Tom. It speaks to a certain level of misogyny.
She was born into a rich family. She hasn't worked hard at all.
Oh, I don't know. That's the politics of envy, Tom. It's just not on.
Sowing the seeds of hatred. A spokesperson for Mrs. Rinehart has issued a statement. The attention-seeking activist tried to trash Miss Rinehart in front of thousands of people, but instead he ended up trashing himself and others who think, as Premier Roger Cook has said, sowing the seeds of hatred is okay in the name of art.
Art in quotation marks. That's quite funny. Owned.
Those people being the Perth Festival spokespeople and those mainly government organisations that sponsor it. So again, the implication that, no public money should be going to this entire festival because Peter Garrett said this thing. Plus a corporate misusing its shareholders' money for this and earlier divisive woke causes. Of course, Gina Rinehart would never use her money for causes that she believes in, particularly divisive ones.
Not divisive woke causes, though.
No, that's the difference. A Perth Festival spokesperson appeared to take no issue with the comments and said artistic expression was personal, adding views shared by artists are their own. Perth Festival recognises that people have many different perspectives. I'm sorry, this is like a good statement from Perth Festival, but it's just funny to be like, well, some people would like to dance on Miss Rinehart's grave and some other people would prefer to piss on it. Experiences opinions that reflect the complexity and rich diversity of our community. So it's like that's kind of a bullshit statement away, but at least they're standing by Peter Garrett and saying,
they're not
ridiculous.
Slamming him.
Sarah Hanson-Young, I believe she must have been asked about these comments because she's spokesperson for arts policy for the party, I think. And she said, what did anyone think was going to happen when Midnight Oil rocks up at a concert? Slight fact check, Sarah. It wasn't actually Midnight Oil, but that's okay. They're a band known for their protest songs. Peter Garrett expressed a sentiment many Aussies resonate with. Mining magnates and the mining lobby have far too much power in our parliaments at the expense of the environment and climate. Now, I don't know, is saying we should all dance like we're dancing on Gina Rinehart's grave, does that go against the four pillars of of peace and nonviolence?
Did we kill her? Or is she just dead? I don't think he called for her slaying. He didn't call for her execution. He just said once she dies.
It's a very good point. It's a very good point. And I guess, again, I get to this point where you're like, oh, all these motherfuckers making these comments, like the hypocrisy,
yes,
right?
Yes,
like the same anti-woke people who are still
the double
pearl-clutching
standards,
at these double standards. So yeah, that I think that, and then I immediately think, what are you doing, Tom? You're wasting your breath and your time on
It's boring, isn't it? I'm so sick of it. Like we got to be, and we're also sick of it. And yet you're right, we keep feeding it.
Yeah. Well, then it sort of gets a lot more serious, of course, when we get onto speech and art in relation to Israel-Palestine. And again, a whole bunch of stories of late that have fed into this kind of narrative. Have you followed the Creative Australia story much? Did you just come across
Only a little bit. I listened to, I think, the 7 a.m. podcast about it.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there's a great piece in Jacobin, Australia, if people want to check out. It's called In Australia, Pro-Israel Politicians Are Attacking Artists by Anastasia Murney and Toya Webb, that basically summarizes a bunch of these stories of late. And I'll just read a little bit from it. On February 13th, the Australian government's peak arts body, Creative Australia, rescinded an invitation to artist Khaled Sabsabi and curator Michael D'Agostino to represent Australia at the 2026 Venice Biennale. Basically, there was an article in The Australian. It's, again, the way these campaigns are completely coordinated through News Corp is pretty remarkable.
Yeah.
Article in The Australian accusing Sabsabi of anti-Semitism, pointing out the fact he boycotted the Sydney Festival back in 2022 when the Sydney Festival received funding from the Israeli embassy. Mm-hmm. I was also a small part of that boycott, and lots of other artists.
News reports say that you are a literal Nazi, don't they?
Well, that's true. Yes. We'll get to that. Don't worry. Weirdly, that didn't come up in that coverage. That was my last anti-Semitism scandal. Then later that day, Conservative Senator Claire Chandler disingenuously claimed that Sabsabi produced artwork promoting Osama bin Laden and 9/11. In question time, Chandler asked the Australian Labor Party Foreign Minister Penny Wong, why is the government funding an overseas trip for Mr. Sabsabi, who has featured dead Hezbollah leader Nasrallah in his artworks? Flustered, Wong promised to get answers. Chandler's accusation betray an unwillingness to critically engage with art. Imagine. While Subsabi's work You features Hasran Nasrallah, it is not so easily categorized as an endorsement of Hezbollah. But in an apparent bid to avoid controversy, especially bad faith charges of anti-Semitism, Creative Australia dumped the artist in a snap meeting. There was reporting at the time this is a unanimous board meeting that turned out to not be the case. Larissa Berendt wasn't even at the meeting. Some people have since resigned from the board after this decision has come out, which sort of implies doesn't sound like everyone was on board.
Not very unanimous, yeah.
And I was confused. I know some people on that board, right, as figures, and I know their politics. I know their commitment to sort of a free Palestine. So it all seems very bizarre. This is the statement they put out. Creative Australia is an advocate for freedom of artistic expression and is not an adjudicator on the interpretation of art. However, the board believes a prolonged and divisive debate about the 2026 selection outcome poses an unacceptable risk to public support for Australia's artistic community and could undermine our goal of bringing Australians together through art and creativity.
Well, that's good. They were able to just shut the debate right down by disendorsing him. And now it's solved and no one has to worry about it. Thanks, Creative Australia.
That shit just drives me crazy. This kind of like trying to have it both ways, fucking bullshit. And whenever one of these stories come up, it always starts with like, "Hey, we support people's right to protest. We support artistic freedom." But in this particular case, in which a small amount of pressure has been applied to us, and we want to avoid the headache, I'm sorry, we will be giving up on that principle entirely.
Yeah. One thing that I'm somewhat unclear on with this story is, and maybe it is just unclear, is that there's the artwork that features Nasrallah, but there's also then later some were saying that, the decision primarily or the greatest concern was the artwork with 9/11 and it's like basically a Bush did 9/11 kind of nod. Do you know this one? I think it's a video.
Yeah, it's called Thank You Very Much, and the Jacobin piece actually goes into it. And again, credit to the Jacobin piece for actually being like, hang on, what is this art that we're talking about? Here's what it is, and here's what, I mean, it's open to interpretation, of course, but here is a reading of it. It shows footage of the attacks happening and then George Bush saying thank you very much. Now, that could be a comment on the way that the West used the 9/11 attacks to justify something it always wanted to do, which was invade Iraq, for example. Yeah. It could be a critique or a satire on the war on terror. I don't know. It almost doesn't fucking matter. He's an artist. Artists have a right to express themselves. Art is supposed to challenge us. Art is supposed to push the envelope. This dude is a widely respected artist for a very long time.
Yeah.
Creative Australia had previously hailed him as someone who comments on identity and lots of other things, and went through the correct process, the peer-led process that saw him be selected as Australia's representative at the Biennale. All that was done, and then again, just the slightest amount of pressure comes to bear, and these arts institutions just fold and say, "Nah, fuck you, we'll throw you under the bus."
Yeah.
It's crazy.
It is. Snowflakes, as you say.
Jacobin piece also mentions the Antoinette Lattouf case as well, which should be resolved relatively soon. At least like all the closing arguments have been made. But of course, we know what happened there. She dared to share a Human Rights Watch post pointing out the fact that Israel was committing alleged war crimes, and she was removed after a lobbying campaign by supporters of Israel. We know that happened. Also, the Australian Research Council suspended funding for Randa Abdel Fattah after lobbying from the coalition that they were bragging about, by the way. They were saying, because of our questions, the ARC suspended funding for this academic because she dares to speak up for Palestine. And in the piece it says this: there are striking commonalities between the personal experience of Lattouf, Abdel Fattah and Subsabi. In each case, right-wing Zionists pilloried a prominent Arab Australian with disingenuous accusations of anti-Semitism. And in each case, public institutions responsible for upholding and promoting freedom of expression in their respective fields, capitulated entirely to political pressure.
Yeah. I just don't understand how you could, when you are so blatantly just doing whatever you are fucking told to by News Corp and the opposition, how does the Labor Party justify this? I mean, it reminds me, it's just so like Queensland Labor when they were in power. And particularly on youth crime, just any time that News Corp kicked up a stink about a new issue, a new law they want to change, the LNP would lobby them and they would just roll over and do it. And as we've said time and again, it doesn't matter though what you're like, you are not going to appease these people. They will keep pushing you and keep pushing you because that is the process is the point. The pushing you and getting you to capitulate is the point. And you look fucking weak and everybody loses.
I mean, imagine the alternative. Imagine someone stood up for principles and forcefully, Paul Keating style, if that helps you, Labour hacks. Imagine if someone said to you, no, we believe in artistic expression. We will not buy into this beat up. You're being ridiculous. We stand by the independent process that selected this artist. And we believe that art is there to challenge people. And yes, that might upset some people sometimes, but that's something we believe in a free society. That's what free expression is about. No, we will not sacrifice our principles when it comes to youth crime. We will not lock up kids because that doesn't work and it's cruel and inhumane. We believe in a better way to address these same problems that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Even if people and I've heard this before, even if people disagree with you, they will respect you for standing up for a principle.
Yes,
far
because you stand
more
for something.
than you folding like a fucking house of cards.
Exactly. This is the number one thing. Like, people hate politicians because they don't fucking do what they promised, because maybe they presented themselves as standing for one thing and then they fold on it the next minute. It's not like, even if people don't agree with you on everything, they will at least somewhat respect you for standing up for what you believe in. But Labor is just proving time and again, particularly, on this issue, on Palestine and Israel, that they cannot do that. They're unwilling to.
Yeah. The dumbest example, hands down, this isn't just affecting Arab Australian prominent figures, as bad as that is, obviously, and they're in the firing line all the time, but Indigenous artists as well. Okay, this is such an insane story. 2 Palestinian flags on a tapestry on display at the National Gallery of Australia have been concealed with white fabric in what the artists have described as an act of censorship they only agreed to reluctantly. The large tapestry is part of, now I'm going to mispronounce this, Te Pepe Auri, Where the Gods Cannot Be Fooled exhibition. Apologies to all involved. A group show by Pacific Indigenous art collective Savage Club. The work features a number of flags, including the Aboriginal flag and the words Justice Now, the Torres Strait Islander flag, the West Papua flag, along with other Moana and Pacific people symbols, insignia, and social justice slogans. Raymond, that's the head of Savage Club, said the club was very surprised and concerned when they were told in the days before the exhibition launched in June last year that there was a high-level security risk with displaying the Palestinian flags on the tapestry, and were given 2 options to proceed: to remove the work from the show or cover the flags. Although she did not know who ordered the directive.
What is the security risk?
Well, that's it. It's like, okay, if we take that seriously, that means anti-Palestinian.
Yeah,
you're worried about the threat from pro-Israel folks?
So then the problem, the thing that needs to be addressed then is the people simply displaying a flag, not someone who would like commit an act of violence because the Palestinian flag was included in a piece of artwork.
Insane. It remains unclear what prompted the NGA to cover the flags 10 days after the artwork was installed. So they put up the artwork and then 10 days later, I guess they introduced this.
Right.
Or if the gallery was acting on a specific threat of complaint. In a statement, a spokesman said it was due to the risk posed by sensitive content.
Sensitive content?
Yes.
Also, of course it's sensitive content. It's like a piece by and about First Nations people,
Yes.
Anyway.
Colonialism. We acknowledge the Savage Club artists were placed in a difficult position by you, NGA. You've put them in this position, actually. You've done that.
Yes.
And we're grateful for their willingness to collaborate with us in a challenging and uncertain environment. Consideration was given to past protest activity and vandalism at the National Gallery, the volatility of the environment and reported violence, vandalism and threats in Canberra and across Australia at the time. What?
Well, this language around like a challenging and uncertain environment, the volatility of the environment. Who is creating a challenging, uncertain, and volatile environment? It is you when you make this a fucking issue. Like when you feed this kind of, it is snowflakery. You're right. But it's like, it's snowflakery that's not just wet and dissolving and about being fragile and sensitive. It's also in a way angry and divided and I don't know.
just these people, these professional arts administrators who are like, oh, let's not cause a fuss, or like, let's not do anything.
The Palestinian flag
that might, cause a fuss. And obviously that's only coming from one direction. I mean, who knows what would happen if there was an art piece displaying the Israeli flag? Would the same be done?
And someone asked them to cover it up.
Yes, imagine that. I mean, again, at the end of the Jacobin piece, they quote a piece in Overland, which I haven't had a chance to read, but I thought this was interesting. It's like the genocide in Gaza pivots ideologically on the weaponization of anti-racist discourse in the service of political repression.
I see here you've mentioned Ash Sarkar, and I really want to read her book that's just come out now about liberal identity politics. I listened to the interview with Aaron Bastani.
Yeah.
Aaron Bastani, on Navarro Media. And it is really interesting. And I agree, yes, it is when you focus so much on just this, like the language and the symbols and the outrage of it all. It's so counterintuitive and counter-revolutionary and counterintuitive to everything that the left has been trying to achieve. And that is why the right has weaponized it.
They've adopted that same thing, right? That idea of safety. So cancel culture is terrible, but look at us trying to get all these people fired. Or if you wear a keffiyeh, or if you dare to display the Palestinian flag on your own fucking artwork that we've chosen to exhibit, you should get fired, you should get cancelled. If you're a comedian who does a routine in which he satirizes the enforcement of a policy of the Nazi Hitler saluted Victoria, that should be filmed, put into the media, and he should be approached by the police. These are just examples that I could think of.
Just examples of where we should let people be and just support them in their comedy.
Yes. I mean, I think it's really interesting, and I mean, there's not much to be done about it now. I guess I just it's one thing, I guess, for politicians to be spineless and to backtrack on their promises and stuff. I'm not saying it's good, but we're used to it, and like there are all these political pressures weighing in on them. But when you have organizations and institutions that are designed, like their primary purpose, their very being is about defending freedom of expression and people's freedom of speech, and they're buckling and capitulating so fucking easily in this environment when it actually counts, right? It's easy to have these principles when no one's applying any pressure to you, but when it actually counts and they give up, I mean, they should be fucking called out. And full solidarity to the members of the Australian artistic community who are organising and protesting against this.
Yeah.
You know, people are saying the Viennale Pavilion is basically a picket line now, and like no other artist should fill that slot in protest to Creative Australia's decision here. I mean, these are lines that we cannot accept anymore. It's disgraceful.
Indeed. Here.
We're heading straight for the eye of the gunfight. We're heading straight for the eye of the category 5. But when I look into your eyes, I see a blue sky.
Well, I think that's probably all we have time for on this little show of ours. I've got a cyclone question mark, rain, wind, don't know. You'll know by the time this comes out, I guess, to go prepare for. With that in mind, again, we don't know what is going to happen in Brisbane, but if you are in Brisbane and you want to help, each of the 3 lower house Greens MPs have set up volunteer registers, have had like hundreds of people already sign up to help with cleanup preparation already, but by the time this has come out, potential cleanup and fallout from any kind of flooding or cyclone event. We'll put the link in the show, or the links in the show notes to each of those, Libby in Ryan, Max in Griffith, and Stephen in Brisbane. I don't know yet in terms of support from outside of the affected areas what you can do too much, but I think just if you're in those areas, helping your neighbours is very, very helpful. There's also an event, Tom, that you wanted to shout out as a call to action this week.
Yeah, look, if you're a Victorian Greens member, there is a campaign conference happening on the 22nd of March at Trades Hall. All you need to do is register. We'll put the link for that in the show notes. That's a campaign conference, so talking about all the skills and strategies and stuff that we do when we're campaigning to try and win Greens votes and door knocking and such. It's totally free, but there are limited places. So yeah, if you haven't already registered, that's happening on March the 22nd at Trades Hall.
Fun. Lots of events. There are 1,000,001 events across the country happening right now as we get closer and closer, to the federal election. So I think we can put the link to upcoming Greens events as well in the website, in the show notes, sorry. And not all of the local events will always be listed there, so check in with your local campaigns, go along to something and get involved. We don't have long left to save the world, keep our greens MPs in there and stop it all going to shit. So thanks very much for listening. Leave us a 5-star review if you like the show and the episodes. Follow us at Serious Danger AU on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Find all the links to merch and the Patreon and everything else you need at seriousdangerpod.com, or I think if you go to the link tree that's linked in our social media, all the info and stuff is there. And we would love to hear your voice memos if you've been on the ground helping out, maybe in Brisbane with cyclone prep, or if you've been out door knocking or you're at an event or you've got a question for us, please email them to us, hello@seriousdangerpod.com. See you on the other side.
Bye, everybody.
Serious Danger Australia.